On September 18, 1931, Japanese forces detonated a section of railway track near Mukden in northeastern China. Within 5 months, they controlled an industrial territory larger than France and Germany combined. The invasion itself shocked nobody. Japan had occupied Korea for decades, maintained treaty ports across China, and openly coveted Manchuria's resources. What remained hidden for years was the financial weapon deployed alongside the tanks and artillery. The Yokohama Specie Bank, Japan's primary instrument for overseas expansion, began printing Chinese currency at a scale that turned monetary policy into a tool of conquest. Between 1932 and 1945, Japanese presses produced an estimated 4 billion yuan in counterfeit notes, roughly equivalent to printing $2 trillion in today's terms and flooding it into a captured economy. This wasn't a covert intelligence operation run from basement printing facilities. This was industrial-scale economic warfare, authorized at the highest levels of government, executed through a bank with international respectability, and designed to accomplish what military occupation alone could never achieve: the complete destruction of Chinese economic sovereignty in the occupied territories. The story of how a legitimate banking institution became the engine of financial sabotage connects 3 critical threads of 20th century history. First, the evolution of Japan's imperial strategy from territorial conquest to economic domination. Second, the mechanics of currency manipulation as a weapon of war, how flooding a captured economy with counterfeit money systematically transfers wealth, destroys savings, and breaks resistance. Third, the human cost measured not in battlefield casualties, but in the quiet devastation of families watching their life savings evaporate, merchants unable to distinguish real currency from forgeries, and an entire regional economy spiraling into hyperinflation, while the occupying power extracted resources at artificially suppressed prices. The Yokohama Specie Bank occupied a unique position in Japan's imperial apparatus. Established in 1880 as the nation's primary foreign exchange bank, it financed Japan's overseas expansion for half a century before the Manchurian operation began. By 1931, the bank operated 37 branches across China, Korea, and Southeast Asia, processed international trade settlements, and maintained correspondent relationships with major financial institutions in London, New York, and Paris. Its reputation stood on par with the British-controlled Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation. International observers viewed it as a legitimate commercial enterprise, not an instrument of state aggression. That perception provided perfect cover for what came next. The scale of the counterfeit operation exceeded anything previously attempted in modern economic warfare. Traditional counterfeiting involved criminals producing limited quantities for profit. This was different. An entire nation's printing capacity redirected toward manufacturing another country's currency, with the explicit goal of rendering that currency worthless in occupied territories. Japanese technicians studied Chinese banknotes with the same precision applied to military intelligence. They matched paper quality, ink composition, and printing techniques so precisely that even Chinese bank officials struggled to identify forgeries. The operation required coordination between the Ministry of Finance, the Kwantung Army occupying Manchuria, the Yokohama Specie Bank's branch network, and printing facilities in Japan, Korea, and eventually within Manchuria itself. What made this weapon particularly devastating was its invisibility to international observers. When Japanese forces seized Manchurian factories, newspapers reported it. When they controlled railway networks, diplomats protested. But when counterfeit yuan flooded local markets, driving prices up 300% within 2 years, foreign correspondents described it as inevitable wartime inflation. The Chinese government in Nanjing knew something systematic was occurring. Their intelligence services documented the forgeries, tracked distribution patterns, and identified Yokohama Specie Bank branches as circulation points. But proving it internationally meant accusing a respected financial institution of state-sponsored economic sabotage, a charge that seemed too extraordinary for Western powers already reluctant to confront Japanese aggression. The human impact unfolded across multiple dimensions. Chinese merchants accepting payment in currency they couldn't verify as genuine. Factory workers watching their wages lose purchasing power weekly. Families with savings in local banks discovering those institutions held reserves increasingly composed of worthless paper. The counterfeit operation didn't just facilitate Japanese resource extraction. It systematically impoverished the occupied population while making resistance economically impossible. A farmer couldn't fund guerrilla operations when the money hidden under his floorboards might be counterfeit. A merchant couldn't finance resistance networks when he couldn't trust the currency his customers used. Economic warfare paralyzed opposition before military force became necessary. The Yokohama Specie Bank operation in Manchuria established a template later applied across Japanese-occupied Asia. When forces moved into northern China in 1937, counterfeit operations expanded. When they occupied French Indochina in 1940, similar monetary manipulation followed. By 1942, Japanese authorities operated coordinated counterfeiting programs across occupied territories from Burma to the Philippines, each calibrated to local currencies and economic conditions. The Manchurian operation proved that monetary warfare could achieve strategic objectives: resource extraction, population control, resistance suppression, more efficiently than military occupation alone. Understanding this largely forgotten chapter of financial warfare requires examining how it began, how it operated, and why it succeeded for over a decade before Allied victory ended the scheme. This is the story of the Japanese bank that flooded China with fake money to destroy its economy. The Yokohama Specie Bank opened its Mukden branch in 1906, 25 years before the Manchurian incident made that city the capital of a Japanese puppet state. The timing wasn't coincidental. Japan's victory in the Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905 gave Tokyo control over the South Manchuria Railway and accompanying economic concessions. The Yokohama Specie Bank followed immediately, establishing branches in every major Manchurian city within 5 years. Its stated purpose was facilitating trade between Japan and northeast China, financing exports of Manchurian soybeans to Japan, providing currency exchange for Japanese merchants, and processing international settlements. The bank's actual function extended far beyond commercial banking. From its inception, the Yokohama Specie Bank operated as an arm of Japanese foreign policy. The institution's founding charter, approved by the Meiji government in 1880, explicitly designated it as the nation's official foreign exchange bank. Unlike purely commercial banks answering to shareholders, the Yokohama Specie Bank reported to the Ministry of Finance and coordinated closely with the Foreign Ministry. Its branch managers in China weren't merely bankers, they were intelligence assets, reporting on local economic conditions, political sentiment, and opportunities for expanding Japanese influence. When the Ministry of Finance needed economic data from Manchuria, they consulted Yokohama Specie Bank reports. When the military planned operations requiring local currency or financial networks, they coordinated with bank officials. The bank's Manchurian operations before 1931 established infrastructure crucial for what followed. By 1930, Yokohama Specie Bank branches in Mukden, Harbin, and Dairin handled an estimated 60% of all foreign exchange transactions in Manchuria. Chinese merchants needing to convert local currency into yen for purchasing Japanese goods did so through Yokohama Specie Bank windows. Japanese firms extracting Manchurian resources banked there. The institution became embedded in regional commerce so thoroughly that its legitimacy went unquestioned. When a Yokohama Specie Bank branch opened for business, local Chinese officials attended the ceremony. When its managers hosted receptions, Chinese merchants and officials mingled with Japanese businessmen. This respectability proved invaluable once the bank's mission shifted from facilitating commerce to weaponizing currency. The transition from legitimate banking to economic warfare didn't happen overnight. It emerged from Japan's evolving strategy toward Manchuria across the 1920s. Japanese policymakers divided into two camps regarding the resource-rich region. The Foreign Ministry favored working within existing international frameworks, maintaining formal Chinese sovereignty while expanding economic influence through investment and trade agreements. The Kwantung Army, the force garrisoning Japan's Manchurian concessions, pushed for direct military control. Throughout the 1920s, the Foreign Ministry's approach dominated, but Manchurian warlord Zhang Zuolin's resistance to Japanese demands increasingly frustrated Tokyo. When Zhang's son, Zhang Shuiliang, assumed power after his father's assassination in 1928 and aligned more closely with the Chinese nationalist government in Nanjing, Japanese military officers concluded that diplomatic approaches had failed. The Mukden incident of September 1931 resolved the debate in favor of military action. Kwantung army officers, acting without authorization from Tokyo, staged the railway bombing that provided pretext for occupying Manchuria. Within days, Japanese forces controlled every major Manchurian city. By February 1932, they had established Manchukuo, a puppet state nominally led by Puyi, the last Qing emperor, but actually governed by Japanese advisors. International condemnation followed. The League of Nations eventually declared the occupation illegal, but no major power intervened militarily. Japan had seized an industrial base producing coal, iron, timber and soybeans at a scale exceeding the output of most European nations. The question facing Japanese planners became how to extract maximum value from this conquest while maintaining control over a hostile Chinese population, outnumbering Japanese settlers 30-1. Military occupation solved the control problem, but created an economic challenge. Manchuria in 1931 operated on multiple overlapping currencies. The Chinese dollar issued by Nanjing circulated alongside various local currencies issued by Manchurian banks. Mexican silver dollars, widely used across China for international trade, remained common in major cities. The Japanese yen had limited circulation outside areas with concentrated Japanese populations. For Japan to effectively exploit Manchurian resources, they needed economic integration, Manchurian producers accepting payment in currencies advantageous to Japanese buyers, prices for raw materials remaining low despite rising global demand, and local populations unable to accumulate capital that might fund resistance. The traditional solution would involve establishing a new currency for Manchukuo, backed by Japanese reserves and managed through Japanese-controlled institutions. This approach faced two problems. First, replacing an established currency system required time and faced resistance from populations forced to exchange existing money at disadvantageous rates. Second, issuing a new currency meant accepting financial responsibility for its stability. If the Manchukuo dollar crashed, it would reflect poorly on Japanese economic management and might trigger international criticism. A more elegant solution emerged from discussions between Ministry of Finance officials, Kwantung Army planners, and Yokohama Specie Bank executives in late 1932. What if instead of replacing Chinese currency in Manchuria, they simply flooded the region with it? Chinese dollars would continue circulating, maintaining superficial economic continuity. But if the volume of currency increased dramatically through counterfeit notes indistinguishable from genuine ones, predictable consequences followed. Inflation would accelerate, eroding purchasing power and destroying savings. Chinese merchants and producers, desperate to escape worthless currency, would eagerly accept Japanese yen for goods sold to Japanese buyers. Resource extraction would occur at artificially depressed prices denominated in inflating Chinese currency, while payment to Japanese interests happened in stable yen. The occupied population would bear the cost of inflation, while Japanese interests captured the value of Manchurian production. The plan required capabilities the Yokohama Specie Bank uniquely possessed. Its branches throughout Manchuria could distribute counterfeit notes directly into commercial circulation. Its reputation for financial probity meant Chinese merchants would accept notes passed through its windows without excessive scrutiny. Its international banking relationships provided cover. If questioned about currency flows, officials could cite legitimate commercial transactions. Most critically, the bank's direct connection to the Ministry of Finance and access to Japan's printing technology meant it could produce counterfeits matching genuine Chinese currency in quality and volume. What began as theoretical discussion in Tokyo conference rooms became operational reality with shocking speed. The first counterfeit Chinese dollars produced for the Manchurian operation came off presses in Osaka during January 1932, 4 months after the Mukden incident. Japanese technicians had obtained genuine banknotes issued by the Central Bank of China through Yokohama Specie Bank channels, legitimate notes acquired in routine currency exchange transactions. These samples went to the Printing Bureau of the Ministry of Finance, where specialists analyzed every detail: paper composition, watermark placement, ink formulation, engraving depth, serial number fonts. Each element received meticulous study. The goal wasn't merely producing convincing counterfeits for limited intelligence operations. The goal was industrial-scale production of notes indistinguishable from genuine currency, even under expert examination. Japan's printing technology in 1932 ranked among the world's most advanced. The Printing Bureau had produced Japanese currency since the Meiji era, incorporating anti-counterfeiting features matching those of European and American notes. They understood paper chemistry, ink formulation, and intaglio engraving at a level few nations could match. Applying this expertise to reproducing Chinese currency presented technical challenges, but nothing insurmountable. The primary difficulty involved matching the specific paper used for Chinese banknotes, a cotton-linen blend with particular texture and weight. Japanese chemists analyzed samples, determined composition, and within weeks produced paper stock virtually identical to Chinese originals. Watermark reproduction required greater sophistication. Genuine Chinese banknotes incorporated watermarks created during paper formation, images visible when held to light, produced by varying paper thickness. Counterfeiting watermarks convincingly meant replicating the papermaking process itself, not simply printing designs on finished paper. The Printing Bureau established a dedicated production line using molds matching Chinese watermark patterns. The resulting paper, when examined against genuine notes, showed watermark clarity and placement indistinguishable from authentic currency. Even bank tellers trained to detect counterfeits struggled to identify these forgeries through watermark examination. Ink presented less difficulty. Chinese banknotes used standard intaglio printings, inks available internationally. Japanese suppliers produced similar formulations for legitimate currency printing. The critical factor was color matching, ensuring the blues, greens, and browns on counterfeit notes matched genuine currency precisely. Technicians compared samples under various lighting conditions, adjusting formulations until color differentiation became impossible without spectroscopic analysis unavailable to 1930s bank tellers. Serial number printing required equal precision. Each note needed unique serial numbers following sequences consistent with genuine Chinese issuance patterns. The Printing Bureau developed numbering systems producing serials that fell within known authentic ranges, avoiding detection through serial number analysis. The first production run totaled 10 million yuan in various denominations, ones, fives, tens, and hundreds. These notes moved from Osaka to Mukden via diplomatic pouch in February 1932, consigned to the Yokohama Specie Bank's Manchurian headquarters. Distribution began immediately through a process designed to maximize legitimacy while preventing traceability. The bank didn't simply dump counterfeit notes into circulation through criminal channels. Instead, they entered the money supply through routine banking operations that left no obvious trail. Yokohama Specie Bank branches conducted normal commercial business, accepting deposits, making loans, handling currency exchange. These legitimate transactions provided perfect cover for introducing counterfeits. When the Chinese merchant deposited genuine yuan and later withdrew funds, the teller might return a mix of genuine and counterfeit notes. When Japanese businesses purchased supplies from Chinese vendors and paid through Yokohama Specie Bank transfers, the bank delivered payment in counterfeit currency. When individuals exchanged Japanese yen for local currency, counterfeits comprised part of what they received. Each transaction appeared routine. No individual recipient received sufficient volume to trigger suspicion, but across hundreds of daily transactions, at dozens of branches, counterfeit notes flooded into Manchuria's economy. The distribution strategy reflected sophisticated understanding of monetary systems. Currency circulates through economies not in linear fashion, but through complex networks of transactions. A counterfeit note, entering circulation through a legitimate bank, might pass through dozens of hands before anyone questioned its authenticity. Merchant to supplier, supplier to worker, worker to shopkeeper, shopkeeper to wholesaler. By the time suspicion arose, tracing the note's origin became impossible. Even if investigators identified a counterfeit note's entry point as a Yokohama Specie Bank transaction, the bank could claim it received the note from depositors and passed it along unknowingly. Without proof of deliberate distribution, establishing criminal intent proved legally impossible. Japanese authorities maintained plausible deniability through compartmentalization. Printing bureau technicians producing counterfeit notes understood they were reproducing Chinese currency, but might reasonably believe it was for intelligence purposes, providing operatives with untraceable funding for covert operations. A practice common among intelligence services. Yokohama Specie Bank branch managers distributing notes knew they received currency shipments from Tokyo, but might genuinely not know which notes were counterfeit, especially given the forgery's quality. Only a small group of Ministry of Finance officials, senior Kwantung Army officers, and top Yokohama Specie Bank executives understood the operation's full scope and strategic purpose. The initial 10 million yuan injection represented a test of both technical quality and distribution methodology. Japanese planners monitored results carefully. Would Chinese merchants accept the notes without question? Would bank tellers in Chinese-controlled institutions detect forgeries when notes circulated beyond Japanese-occupied areas? Would the Chinese government's financial authorities notice unusual currency patterns? The answers proved encouraging from a Japanese perspective. Merchants accepted the notes routinely. The quality made detection nearly impossible without specialized equipment. Bank tellers occasionally identified suspicious notes, but attributed them to criminal counterfeiting, not state-sponsored economic warfare. Chinese financial authorities, focused on managing Nanjing's currency amid political instability and economic challenges, noticed no unusual patterns in Manchuria beyond expected disruption from military occupation. Success with the test run prompted expansion. By mid-1932, monthly production increased to 50 million yuan. By year's end, the printing bureau was producing 100 million yuan monthly, distributed through an expanding network of Yokohama Specie Bank branches and cooperating Japanese firms. The operation's scale began affecting Manchuria's economy in measurable ways. Prices for basic goods, rice cloth, cooking oil, rose 15% between February and December 1932 in Japanese-occupied cities. Chinese officials attributed increases to wartime disruption and supply chain problems. Japanese planners understood the currency injection's inflationary effect was beginning to manifest. The psychological dimension proved as important as the economic impact. Chinese merchants operating in occupied Manchuria faced paralyzing uncertainty. Any currency they accepted might be counterfeit, but refusing payment meant losing business to competitors willing to take the risk. Banking deposits offered no security. Institutions holding reserves increasingly comprised of worthless counterfeits faced insolvency if depositors attempted mass withdrawals. Savings evaporated as inflation accelerated. A family with 1,000 yuan in savings in January 1932 found that amount purchased 15% less by December. By December 1933, it purchased 40% less. By December 1934, it purchased barely half what it had 2 years earlier. Japanese resource buyers exploited these conditions ruthlessly. Manchurian coal producers, desperate to convert depreciating yuan into stable currency, accepted yen payment at rates increasingly favorable to Japanese buyers. Soybean farmers sold harvests to Japanese traders, offering yen rather than local merchants paying in yuan. Timber operations, iron mines, and manufacturing facilities fell under Japanese control, as owners facing bankruptcy sold assets for whatever stable currency they could obtain. The counterfeit operation didn't merely cause inflation, it systematically transferred economic assets from Chinese to Japanese ownership through currency manipulation that left few visible fingerprints. By 1933, the counterfeit currency operation required infrastructure beyond what civilian printing facilities could provide. Monthly production targets reached 200 million yen, quantities demanding dedicated facilities, expanded supply chains, and specialized personnel. The Ministry of Finance authorized construction of a printing facility in Mukden, specifically for counterfeit production, operating undercover as a branch of the Manchukuo government's official printing office. The facility occupied a compound in the Japanese-controlled industrial district, surrounded by security that suggested military importance rather than routine government operations. Inside, over 300 workers operated presses, cutting machinery, and quality control stations across 3 shifts, producing counterfeit Chinese currency 24 hours daily. The Mukden facility represented industrial-scale counterfeiting unprecedented in modern history. Traditional counterfeiting operations involved criminal enterprises producing limited quantities for profit, often from basement printing presses with substandard materials. This was different. A government-financed factory applying advanced technology and manufacturing discipline to reproducing another nation's currency. Workers received salaries comparable to skilled industrial positions. Managers implemented quality control procedures matching those in legitimate currency production. Production lines operated with the efficiency of automobile factories, each station specializing in specific tasks: paper preparation, printing, cutting, serial numbering, bundling, and packaging. The facility's output in 1933 totaled approximately 2.4 billion yuan, equivalent to roughly 40% of the entire currency in circulation across China before the Manchurian occupation. This volume couldn't possibly circulate solely in Manchuria without causing hyperinflation so obvious it would trigger international investigation. Japanese planners developed a more sophisticated distribution strategy. Counterfeit notes printed in Mukden would circulate throughout Japanese-controlled territories in China, not just Manchuria. As Japanese forces expanded operations into Inner Mongolia and northern China provinces in 1934, counterfeit currency followed. Yokohama Specie Bank branches opened in newly occupied cities: Tianjin, Beijing, Shanghai, where the bank already maintained a branch from earlier decades, each becoming a distribution point for counterfeit notes. Logistics presented considerable challenges. Moving billions of yuan in physical currency from Mukden to distribution points across China required secure transportation, storage facilities, and handling procedures preventing theft or exposure. The South Manchuria Railway, controlled entirely by Japanese interests, provided the transportation network. Currency shipments moved in sealed containers marked as government documents or commercial goods, accompanied by armed guards. At destination cities, Yokohama Specie Bank branches received shipments directly, storing them in vaults until distribution through routine banking operations. The system operated with military precision, reflecting coordination between the Kwantung Army, railway officials, and bank management. Quality control became increasingly critical as production volume expanded. With hundreds of millions of notes flowing off presses monthly, even a small percentage of detectable counterfeits could expose the operation. The Mukden facility employed 50 quality inspectors whose sole responsibility involved comparing finished notes against genuine currency samples. Inspectors examined paper texture, watermark clarity, ink color consistency, serial number alignment, and overall appearance. Notes failing inspection were destroyed immediately and pulped for reprocessing. The rejection rate hovered around 5%, an acceptable loss given the stakes involved. One poorly made counterfeit note traced back to the Mukden facility could unravel the entire operation. Chinese authorities weren't entirely blind to what was occurring. The Central Bank of China's Anti-Counterfeiting Division, based in Nanjing, received reports throughout 1933 of suspicious currency patterns in occupied territories. Bank officials in Tianjin reported receiving deposits with unusual concentrations of sequential serial numbers, a red flag suggesting batch production. Merchants in Beijing complained about the volume of currency they handled that felt somehow different from notes they remembered from previous years. Chinese intelligence services obtained samples of suspected counterfeit notes and conducted analyses. Their conclusions confirmed suspicions. Many notes circulating in Japanese-occupied areas were high-quality forgeries, but proving Japanese government involvement required evidence that didn't exist. The Yokohama Specie Bank maintained that it handled currency in good faith, unaware of any counterfeits. Japanese diplomatic officials denied any knowledge of systematic counterfeiting, suggesting that criminal elements were exploiting wartime chaos. The Chinese government faced a strategic dilemma. Publicly accusing Japan of state-sponsored counterfeiting would require international arbitration or military response. Arbitration meant presenting evidence to the League of Nations or other international bodies. Evidence that consisted of expert analysis showing certain notes were forgeries, but no proof connecting those forgeries to Japanese government operations. Military response was impossible. Chinese forces were already losing ground to Japanese expansion, and direct confrontation over currency manipulation seemed unlikely to gain international support when Western powers had already refused to intervene over territorial aggression. The Nanjing government chose a different approach, attempting to replace vulnerable currency with new designs and simultaneously restricting the use of suspect notes in areas still under Chinese control. In 1934, the Central Bank of China issued redesigned banknotes incorporating new anti-counterfeiting features. The new notes used different paper composition, updated watermarks, and color schemes distinct from earlier issues. Chinese authorities hoped this would force Japanese counterfeiters to start over with new technical specifications, potentially slowing the operation. The strategy failed for several reasons. First, Japanese technicians obtained samples of the new notes immediately through Yokohama Specie Bank channels and began reproduction work within weeks. Second, the redesigned notes circulated primarily in areas under Chinese government control. Japanese-occupied territories continued using older currency designs, which Japanese presses continued producing. Third, the currency changeover caused economic disruption, with merchants uncertain which notes to accept and at what exchange rates, further destabilizing commerce in contested regions. The failure of China's defensive measures emboldened Japanese planners. By 1935, counterfeit production expanded to include not just currency issued by the Central Bank of China, but also regional banknotes issued by provincial banks and foreign banks operating in China. The Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation's banknotes, widely used in Chinese commerce, became targets. Notes issued by the Bank of Communications and the Bank of China faced similar treatment. Each addition to the counterfeiting portfolio required technical analysis and reproduction work, but the Mukden facility's capabilities had matured sufficiently to handle multiple simultaneous production runs. The economic impact accelerated accordingly. Inflation in Japanese-occupied territories reached 80% annually by 1935, prices doubling every 15 months. Chinese workers demanded wage increases that employers couldn't afford. Merchants raised prices to compensate for currency depreciation, but customers lacked purchasing power to pay higher prices. Businesses failed. Unemployment rose. The occupied population experienced economic devastation comparable to wartime destruction, but without bombs falling or battles being fought. The weapon was invisible, just paper money that looked genuine, but systematically destroyed economic stability. Japanese resource extraction proceeded at an accelerating pace. Coal production in Manchuria increased 150% between 1932 and 1936, with virtually all output exported to Japan at prices denominated in depreciating yuan or paid in stable yen at exchange rates favoring Japanese buyers. Iron ore production doubled, soybean exports tripled, timber extraction increased fourfold. Every resource extraction operation followed the same pattern. Japanese firms purchasing Manchurian materials with currency that maintained value, yen, or with yuan whose purchasing power eroded continuously. The counterfeit operation functioned as a massive hidden subsidy for Japanese industrial expansion, transferring wealth from occupied territories to Japanese interests through monetary manipulation rather than direct taxation. The human cost manifested in quiet desperation rather than dramatic catastrophe, families watching savings evaporate, small businesses collapsing as operating costs exceeded revenues, workers unable to purchase basic necessities despite employment, farmers receiving payment for harvests that couldn't buy seed for next season's planting. The suffering was diffuse, spread across millions of people experiencing gradual impoverishment rather than sudden disaster. This made international intervention unlikely. Foreign journalists covering China focused on military conflicts and political drama, not monetary policy. Economic collapse in occupied territories seemed like predictable wartime consequence, not deliberate policy requiring international response. The winter of 1935-1936 marked a threshold in Manchuria's economic deterioration. Inflation that had been severe but manageable accelerated into crisis. Prices for rice, the staple food, increased 40% between November 1935 and March 1936. Cooking oil prices rose 55%. Cotton cloth prices jumped 60%. Workers earning fixed wages found their purchasing power collapsing weekly. A factory worker in Mukden, earning 30 yuan monthly in late 1935, could purchase enough rice to feed a family of 4, with remaining funds for other necessities. By spring 1936, that same 30 yuan bought barely enough rice for 2 people. Families cooked meals from 3 to 2 daily. Malnutrition rates increased, particularly among children. Medical clinics reported rising cases of diseases associated with dietary deficiencies, beriberi, scurvy, and kwashiorkor. The velocity of currency circulation, the rate at which money changed hands, increased dramatically as people tried to exchange depreciating yuan for goods or more stable currencies as quickly as possible. This acceleration created a feedback loop, worsening inflation. When people expected prices to rise, they purchased immediately rather than delaying, driving demand up and prices higher. Merchants receiving payment rushed to buy inventory before their cash lost more value, further accelerating price increases. The phenomenon economists call flight from currency took hold, people desperately trying to convert money into anything with lasting value. Black markets emerged for Japanese yen, American dollars, and silver. These parallel currency markets operated openly in Mukden, Harbin, and other major cities, with exchange rates posted daily. The official exchange rate maintained by Yokohama Specie Bank and Manchuria government authorities set 1 yuan equal to 0.33 Japanese yen. Black market rates by mid-1936 reached 1 yuan to 0.18 yen, a 45% discount reflecting the yuan's actual purchasing power decline. Chinese merchants conducting business with Japanese firms faced an impossible choice: accept payment in yuan at official rates and watch the money lose value before they could spend it, or demand yen payment and risk Japanese buyers taking their business to more accommodating suppliers. The counterfeit currency operations scale continued expanding even as its effects became catastrophic. The Mukden printing facility ramped production to 300 million yuan monthly by mid-1936. A second facility opened in Harbin in early 1936, adding capacity for another 150 million yuan annually, more than the total legitimate currency in circulation across all of China. This volume couldn't possibly represent sustainable monetary policy. Japanese planners understood they were destroying Manchuria's economy, but destruction was the point. Economic collapse served multiple strategic objectives. First, it prevented capital accumulation that might fund resistance. Chinese merchants and landowners, who might otherwise finance guerrilla operations or support underground nationalist movements, couldn't do so when their wealth evaporated through hyperinflation. Second, it accelerated asset transfer to Japanese interests. Chinese businesses facing insolvency sold to Japanese buyers at fire sale prices. Agricultural land transferred to Japanese ownership as farmers couldn't afford operating costs. Industrial facilities fell under Japanese control as Chinese owners liquidated assets for whatever value remained. Third, economic desperation drove Chinese laborers into Japanese-controlled industries, where employment offered relative stability through yen wages. The counterfeit operation functioned as a tool of economic conquest, more effective than military occupation alone. The social impact extended beyond economics. Traditional family structures strained as multi-generational households that had pooled resources for decades found those resources worthless. Elderly parents who had saved for years to ensure they wouldn't burden their children discovered those savings couldn't buy a week's food. Adult children supporting aging parents while raising their own families faced impossible financial pressures. Divorce rates increased as economic stress fractured marriages. Suicide rates rose, particularly among middle-aged men who had lost businesses or couldn't provide for families. Chinese social workers and relief organizations documented these phenomena in reports that remain in archives. Thousands of pages describing societal breakdown caused not by bombing or battlefield casualties, but by systematic monetary destruction. Chinese authorities attempted various defensive measures, all proving inadequate. Local governments in areas not yet under Japanese military control tried implementing price controls, prohibiting merchants from raising prices beyond specified limits. Merchants responded by withdrawing goods from markets. If selling at mandated prices meant operating at a loss due to their rising supply costs, they simply stopped selling. Shortages followed, with goods available only on black markets at prices far exceeding official limits. Other local governments tried restricting which currency notes could be used for transactions, attempting to exclude suspect denominations. This created chaos as merchants refused notes their customers could obtain most easily, reducing commerce to barter in some areas. The Central Bank of China attempted a more sophisticated response in late 1936, the Currency Reform Act. This legislation aimed to unify China's fragmented currency system, withdrawing various regional and private banknotes from circulation and replacing them with standardized central bank currency. The reform made silver transactions illegal for most purposes, instead requiring use of government-issued fiat currency. Chinese authorities hoped this would simultaneously modernize the monetary system and create new anti-counterfeiting challenges for Japanese operations. The reform faced immediate problems in implementation. Japanese authorities refused to recognize it in occupied territories, declaring that Manchuria and other Japanese-controlled areas would continue using existing currency arrangements. The reform therefore applied only in areas still under Chinese government control, further fragmenting rather than unifying China's monetary system. Japanese counterfeiters adapted to the reform within months. The Mukden and Harbin facilities began producing counterfeit notes, matching the new central bank currency designs. Technical challenges were significant. The new notes incorporated updated anti-counterfeiting features and different paper composition, but Japanese printing technology proved equal to the task. By mid-1937, counterfeit versions of the reformed currency were circulating in occupied territories. The Chinese government's attempt at monetary defense had failed, requiring 18 months of disruptive economic reorganization while providing minimal protection against Japanese operations. The psychological warfare dimension became increasingly apparent. Chinese populations in occupied territories understood at some level that their economic suffering wasn't merely wartime bad luck, but deliberate policy. They couldn't prove it, couldn't quantify it, and couldn't effectively resist it, but the perception spread that Japanese occupation meant economic destruction as surely as military subjugation. This understanding had contradictory effects. For some, it hardened resistance, determination to expel occupiers who were systematically impoverishing them. For others, it bred resignation. If the occupying power possessed tools to destroy their economic lives regardless of what they did, resistance seemed futile. Japanese authorities noted both reactions, but judged that economic desperation ultimately served their interests by making organized resistance materially impossible, whatever the population's attitude. International observers remained largely oblivious to the counterfeiting operation's role in Manchuria's economic crisis. Western journalists reporting from China described inflation as inevitable wartime consequence. Academic economists analyzing the Chinese economy focused on trade imbalances, government spending, and structural economic problems, not on systematic currency counterfeiting. The few voices suggesting Japanese monetary manipulation were dismissed as propagandists or conspiracy theorists. The operation's cover, conducted through a respected banking institution, producing counterfeits of exceptional quality, distributed through routine commercial channels, proved nearly perfect. The weapon remained invisible, even as its effects devastated millions of lives. The counterfeit currency operation's success depended on distribution networks extending far beyond Yokohama Specie Bank branches. By 1937, an estimated 2,000 individuals participated directly in moving counterfeit notes from printing facilities to circulation points across occupied China. These networks operated in layers, with most participants understanding only their immediate role, not the operation's full scope. At the top sat a coordination committee comprising senior Ministry of Finance officials, Kwantung Army intelligence officers, and Yokohama Specie Bank executives, who met quarterly in Tokyo to review production volumes, distribution effectiveness, and strategic adjustments. Below them, regional managers oversaw operations in specific territories: Manchuria, Inner Mongolia, Northern China provinces, each region developing distribution methods suited to local conditions. In Manchuria, the primary distribution channel ran through Yokohama Specie Bank's 42 branches by 1937. Branch managers received monthly currency shipments from Mukden and Harbin printing facilities. These shipments arrived via railway, in sealed containers accompanied by armed guards, creating the appearance of high-value legitimate cargo requiring security. Once received, branch managers integrated counterfeit notes into routine banking operations, using procedures developed over 5 years of operational experience. When merchants deposited genuine yuan, withdrawals might include counterfeits. When Japanese businesses paid Chinese suppliers through bank transfers, delivery could occur in counterfeit notes. When individuals exchanged yen for yuan, counterfeits comprised varying percentages of what they received. The integration of genuine and counterfeit notes prevented detection through several mechanisms. First, tellers rotated which notes they distributed, ensuring no single transaction consisted entirely of counterfeits that might trigger recipient scrutiny. Second, counterfeit percentages varied by transaction type. Exchanges for large amounts might include only 10-15% counterfeits to avoid suspicion, while smaller everyday transactions might run 40-50% counterfeit, since recipients were less likely to examine modest sums carefully. Third, branch managers tracked local economic conditions and adjusted counterfeit distribution accordingly. Areas experiencing economic stability received higher percentages to accelerate inflation, while areas approaching crisis received lower percentages to prevent economic collapse that might trigger investigation. Secondary distribution networks operated through Japanese commercial firms in Manchuria. By 1937, over 400 Japanese companies operated in occupied territories. Trading companies, manufacturers, resource extraction firms, construction companies. Many participated in counterfeit distribution, willingly or unknowingly. The Manchuria Development Corporation, established in 1937 as a quasi-governmental entity managing Japanese economic interests, became a major distribution channel. The corporation paid Chinese workers in mixed genuine and counterfeit currency, purchased supplies from Chinese vendors using counterfeits, and collected fees and rents in genuine currency it then deposited in Yokohama Specie Bank branches, which returned counterfeit notes for subsequent payments. A more covert distribution network operated through intelligence assets and collaborators. The Kwantung Army's intelligence section, the Tokumu Kikan, maintained networks of Chinese informants, business owners willing to cooperate with Japanese authorities, and officials in the Manchukuo puppet government. These individuals received counterfeit currency for operational purposes, paying sub-agents, funding front businesses, or conducting activities requiring untraceable money. The counterfeit's quality meant they functioned as well as genuine currency for these purposes, while preventing any paper trail connecting Japanese authorities to specific operations. If an informant was caught with large amounts of cash, investigation would show the money came from legitimate appearing business transactions, not from Japanese handlers. The expansion of Japanese military operations into northern China in 1937 required rapid distribution network development in newly occupied territories. When Japanese forces seized Beijing in July 1937, Yokohama Specie Bank's existing Beijing branch immediately became a distribution hub. Within weeks, Japanese authorities established 2 additional bank branches in Beijing's commercial districts, each receiving regular currency shipments from Mukden. As forces advanced into Hebei and Shandong provinces during late 1937 and 1938, temporary distribution points operated through military administrative offices until permanent Yokohama Specie Bank branches could be established. Military occupation administrators received monthly currency shipments to pay local workers hired for construction projects, purchase supplies from Chinese merchants, and fund occupation administration expenses. These military channels moved enormous volumes of counterfeit currency, estimated at 150 million yuan monthly during 1938 across northern China occupation zones. Security protocols protecting the operation from exposure became increasingly sophisticated. Printing facilities operated under military security, with access limited to essential personnel who underwent background checks and signed secrecy agreements. Workers understood they would face severe consequences for disclosing operational details, consequences that Japanese military authorities made clear through occasional examples. In 1936, a Korean worker at the Mukden facility attempted to sell information about counterfeit production to Chinese intelligence services. The Kwantung Army's Tokumu Kikan identified the worker through informant networks, arrested him and executed him after a military tribunal convicted him of espionage. His body was displayed publicly with signage indicating the death penalty for traitors. No other worker attempted similar disclosure during the operation's remaining years. Communication about the operation occurred through restricted channels. Written references to counterfeiting never appeared in routine correspondence or official documentation accessible to lower-level officials. Instead, oblique language disguised the operation's nature. Production reports referred to special currency operations or financial supply management. Distribution instructions mentioned economic stabilization measures or monetary circulation adjustment. Only individuals with highest-level security clearances received documentation using direct language about counterfeiting. This compartmentalization meant that historians examining Japanese wartime archives after 1945 found limited direct evidence of the operation despite its massive scale. Most documentation used euphemisms that only revealed meaning when understood in operational context. Transport security evolved to counter Chinese intelligence efforts to interdict currency shipments. Initial shipments via railway in marked containers proved vulnerable after Chinese guerrillas attacked several trains in 1936, destroying containers they believed held military supplies. Subsequent shipments moved in unmarked civilian freight cars, mixed among regular commercial cargo. Armed guards dressed in civilian clothes rode these shipments rather than uniformed soldiers who would attract attention. Routes varied unpredictably to prevent pattern recognition. By 1938, some currency shipments moved via truck convoy over roads controlled by Japanese forces, avoiding railways where guerrilla attacks remained possible. The human element in distribution networks created ongoing security concerns. Branch managers, tellers, and others handling counterfeit currency knew or strongly suspected they were distributing forgeries. Most complied out of loyalty to Japan, career advancement considerations, or fear of consequences for refusing. Some experienced moral qualms about participating in operations impoverishing Chinese civilians. Japanese authorities managed this through a combination of incentives and monitoring. Participants received salary bonuses for distribution work, framed as hazard pay for serving in occupied territories. Simultaneously, intelligence officers monitored for signs of wavering commitment, unusual behavior, drinking heavily, expressing sympathy for Chinese suffering. Individuals showing such signs faced reassignment to Japan, or in extreme cases, arrest on fabricated charges. Chinese intelligence services attempted infiltrating distribution networks with limited success. Placing agents inside Yokohama Specie Bank branches proved nearly impossible given Japanese security screening for all employees. Alternative approaches involved recruiting Chinese merchants who conducted regular business with the bank, asking them to track which transactions seemed to produce counterfeit notes. This intelligence gathering produced useful information about distribution patterns, but couldn't prevent the operation. Knowing that a particular branch was distributing counterfeits didn't stop the practice. Japanese occupation authorities controlled territory militarily and faced no effective Chinese enforcement mechanism. By 1938, the distribution networks had achieved such sophistication that counterfeit currencies circulated throughout occupied China, while leaving minimal evidence trail. Chinese authorities could document that counterfeits existed in large volumes. They could identify that many counterfeits entered circulation through Japanese-controlled channels, but proving systematic government-sponsored counterfeiting, establishing that the Yokohama Specie Bank deliberately distributed forgeries under direction from Tokyo, remained legally impossible. The operation had achieved what its architects intended: economic warfare that devastated target populations while maintaining sufficient deniability to avoid international consequences. The human cost of the counterfeit operation became starkest in Manchuria's cities during 1939. Mukden, with a population exceeding 800,000, experienced economic conditions approaching those of Great Depression America. Unemployment reached 35% among Chinese workers by mid-1938. Those still employed found wages couldn't keep pace with accelerating inflation. A worker earning 40 yuan monthly in January 1938 would need 65 yuan by December to maintain the same purchasing power. But employers facing their own cost pressures rarely provided raises exceeding 10.15% annually. The gap between income and living costs forced families into desperate measures. Food consumption patterns documented by Japanese health authorities conducting surveys in Mukden showed deterioration across all income levels. Working-class Chinese families who had eaten meat weekly in 1938 Families who had eaten rice with every meal switched to cheaper millet for 2 meals daily. Vegetables became luxuries rather than staples. The average daily caloric intake for Chinese adults in Mukden declined from approximately 2,200 calories in 1935 to 1,600 calories by 1938, enough to prevent starvation, but insufficient for people engaged in physical labor. Children's caloric intake fell proportionately more, with pediatric health clinics documenting growth stunting and developmental delays associated with chronic malnutrition. Housing costs created particular hardship. Landlords facing their own inflation-driven cost increases demanded rent payments that consumed 50-60% of working-class family incomes by 1938, up from 30-35% in 1935. Families unable to afford these increases faced eviction. Mukden's homeless population, negligible before the occupation, reached an estimated 15,000 by 1938. These displaced individuals crowded into makeshift shelters on the city's edges, areas lacking sanitation, clean water, or heating during Manchuria's brutal winters. Japanese authorities made minimal provision for homeless populations, viewing economic distress as unfortunate but necessary consequence of occupation. Medical care became increasingly inaccessible. Doctors and hospitals raised fees to compensate for inflation-eroded incomes. A medical consultation that cost 2 yuan in 1935 cost 8 yuan by 1938, a 400% increase, while most workers' wages had increased only 20-30%. Families facing illness chose between medical care and other necessities. Chinese mutual aid societies, traditional community organizations providing members with assistance during crises, found their resources overwhelmed. Societies that had maintained funds to help members pay unexpected medical or funeral expenses discovered those funds bought a fraction of what they had previously. A burial society in Harbin that had accumulated 5,000 yuan over decades to ensure members received proper funerals found that amount would cover perhaps 3 burials by 1938, not the 2025 it would have provided in 1935. Education suffered as families couldn't afford school fees, and schools struggled with operating costs. Primary schools in Mukden that had charged 10 yuan annually for tuition in 1935 charged 35 yuan by 1938, increases many families couldn't absorb. Enrollment dropped accordingly. A primary school in Mukden's Chinese district that had served 400 students in 1935 enrolled 180 by 1938. The students who remained often attended irregularly. Families kept children home to work when extra income opportunities arose or couldn't provide adequate clothing for winter months. Teachers faced their own financial crises, with salaries that hadn't kept pace with inflation, driving many to seek alternative employment. Educational quality declined as experienced teachers left, and remaining staff became demoralized. The psychological toll manifested in rising rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide. Chinese psychiatric hospitals and clinics in Manchuria documented increasing patient loads between 1935 and 1939. A mental health clinic in Mukden that had treated 30-40 patients monthly in 1935 treated 100-120 by 1938. Depression associated with economic hardship, inability to provide for family, loss of social status, hopelessness about the future comprised the largest diagnostic category, particularly among middle-aged men who had been family breadwinners. Mukden's police records showed 23 confirmed suicides in 1935, 67 in 1937, and 114 in 1938. The actual figure was likely higher, as families often concealed suicides to avoid stigma. Social cohesion frayed under economic pressure. Crime rates increased as desperate individuals resorted to theft to survive. Mukden police statistics showed property crimes, burglary, pickpocketing, robbery, increased 200% between 1935 and 1938. Violence between Chinese residents escalated as competition for scarce resources intensified. Labor disputes became more frequent and bitter. As workers demanded wage increases employers couldn't afford. Strikes occurred despite Japanese authorities' prohibition on organized labor activity. Japanese military police suppressed these strikes forcefully, arresting leaders and sometimes executing them for sedition. The generational impact proved particularly tragic. Children growing up during this period experienced developmental problems that would affect them for life. Malnutrition during critical growth years caused permanent stunting. Adults who were children in Manchuria during 1935, 1940 averaged 3 inches shorter than cohorts born earlier or later. Cognitive development suffered from inadequate nutrition and interrupted education. The psychological trauma of watching family economic collapse affected personality development and mental health into adulthood. Japanese occupation policies created a damaged generation whose effects rippled through decades. Gender dynamics shifted in destructive ways. Economic desperation drove increasing numbers of women into prostitution, as families couldn't survive on male wages alone. Mukden's red light district expanded dramatically between 1935 and 1939, with an estimated 2,000 women working as prostitutes by 1938, up from perhaps 300 in 1935. Many were wives and daughters of unemployed or underemployed men, driven to sex work by economic necessity. Japanese occupation authorities regulated and taxed prostitution, viewing it as inevitable and extracting revenue from human misery. The social stigma attached to prostitution meant women entering the trade often faced permanent ostracism from their communities, destroying families and social networks. The counterfeit operation's role in this suffering remained invisible to those experiencing it. Chinese families in Mukden understood they faced economic crisis. They recognized prices rising faster than wages, savings becoming worthless, and traditional coping mechanisms failing. But they attributed these conditions to general wartime disruption, Japanese resource extraction, and occupation-related economic distortion, not to systematic monetary manipulation. The distinction mattered little to individual suffering, but mattered greatly for historical understanding. This wasn't incidental hardship resulting from military occupation. This was deliberately engineered economic destruction, implemented through counterfeiting at industrial scale, designed to impoverish occupied populations while facilitating resource extraction. Japanese occupation authorities documented civilian suffering through various administrative channels, health statistics, police reports, economic surveys, but responded minimally. Some lower-level Japanese officials expressed concern about the humanitarian situation and recommended relief measures. These recommendations generally went unimplemented. Senior Japanese planners viewed Chinese civilian hardship as acceptable cost of securing Manchuria's resources for Japanese industry. The counterfeit operations architects understood their policy was causing mass suffering, but judged it strategically necessary. Internal Ministry of Finance documents from 1938, 1939 acknowledged that monetary policies in occupied territories were creating severe economic distress, but concluded that maintaining low resource extraction costs justified civilian hardship. The international community remained largely unaware of conditions in Manchuria. Western journalists had limited access to Japanese-occupied territories, and those who did report focused primarily on military developments rather than economic conditions. Chinese government representatives attempted raising international awareness about civilian suffering under Japanese occupation, but faced skepticism and limited attention from Western powers preoccupied with European developments. The League of Nations had already condemned Japanese aggression in Manchuria and northern China, but lacked enforcement mechanisms. Adding economic warfare charges to existing condemnations seemed unlikely to change Western powers' unwillingness to confront Japan militarily. Chinese civilians in occupied territories suffered largely beyond international notice or assistance, victims of a weapon most observers didn't recognize existed. The Chinese government's attempts to expose Japanese counterfeiting operations faced systematic obstacles from 1936 through 1941. Chinese financial authorities possessed substantial evidence, thousands of confiscated counterfeit notes, technical analysis proving they were forgeries, intelligence reports documenting distribution through Yokohama Specie Bank channels, and economic data showing inflation patterns inconsistent with legitimate monetary policy. Presenting this evidence internationally in a manner that would prompt meaningful response proved impossible. The fundamental challenge was proving intent and government sponsorship in a way that would overcome Japan's denials and Western powers' reluctance to intervene. The Chinese Ministry of Finance prepared a detailed report in 1937 documenting the counterfeit operation. The report ran 300 pages, including forensic analysis of over 200 suspect banknotes, statistical analysis of currency circulation patterns in occupied territories, economic modeling showing inflation rates inconsistent with wartime conditions alone, and intelligence reports tracking counterfeit distribution networks. Chinese authorities submitted this report to the League of Nations in August 1937, requesting an international investigation and sanctions against Japan for economic warfare violating international law. The League's response disappointed Chinese officials. The Assembly's Economic Committee agreed to review the evidence, but concluded that while counterfeiting clearly occurred in Japanese-occupied territories, proving Japanese government responsibility required more direct evidence than statistical patterns and intelligence reports. Japan denied all involvement, claiming that criminal counterfeiting operations naturally increased during wartime chaos, but operated independently of government policy. The evidentiary standard effectively made proving state-sponsored counterfeiting impossible without access to Japanese government documents admitting the policy, documents that obviously didn't exist in accessible form. Chinese authorities could show counterfeit notes. They could demonstrate these notes circulated primarily through Japanese-controlled channels. They could document that inflation in occupied territories far exceeded rates in comparable wartime situations elsewhere. But they couldn't produce a smoking gun, a Japanese government directive ordering counterfeit production, or captured correspondence between Tokyo and Mukden printing facilities, or testimony from Japanese officials admitting the policy. The operation's compartmentalization and use of euphemistic language in documentation prevented such direct evidence from existing in forms Chinese intelligence could access. Western governments' responses to Chinese evidence ranged from skeptical to dismissive. The United States State Department, presented with Chinese reports in 1937 and 1938, took the position that while economic conditions in occupied China were clearly problematic, distinguishing between legitimate wartime inflation and deliberate monetary manipulation required expertise the State Department didn't possess. American officials suggested the issue belonged before international financial bodies or economic experts, not diplomatic channels. This effectively shelved the matter, as no international financial body possessed investigative authority over Japanese monetary policy in occupied territories. The British Foreign Office responded similarly. British officials recognized that Chinese currency stability mattered to British commercial interests in China. British banks and trading firms held substantial yuan-denominated assets that inflation diminished. However, confronting Japan over alleged counterfeiting seemed likely to damage Anglo-Japanese relations without clear benefit. Britain's focus in the late 1930s centered on European developments, Nazi Germany's expansion, the Spanish Civil War, growing concerns about another general European war. Asian matters received less attention unless they directly threatened British imperial interests in Hong Kong, Singapore, or India. Japanese economic warfare against Chinese populations in Manchuria and northern China, however serious, didn't rise to that threshold. The Soviet Union, which maintained significant intelligence networks in Manchuria and monitored Japanese activities closely, likely understood the counterfeit operation's scope better than Western powers. Soviet intelligence services had assets throughout occupied territories and technical expertise to analyze monetary warfare. However, the Soviet government had its own reasons for not raising the issue internationally. Soviet-Japanese relations in the late 1930s balanced between cooperation and confrontation. Both nations maintained formal diplomatic relations while supporting opposite sides in China's political struggles. The Soviet Union provided military assistance to Chinese nationalist forces fighting Japan, but avoided direct military confrontation. Exposing Japanese counterfeiting operations might provoke Japanese retaliation against Soviet interests in Manchuria and Mongolia. Soviet officials apparently judged that maintaining their own covert operations in the region took priority over raising international awareness of Japanese economic warfare. Japan's diplomatic position rested on outright denial combined with counter-accusations. Japanese representatives claimed that counterfeiting in occupied territories resulted from Chinese criminal organizations exploiting wartime disorder. They suggested that Chinese government accusations represented propaganda attempting to discredit legitimate Japanese economic development in Manchukuo and northern China. Japanese officials pointed to Japanese investment in Manchurian infrastructure, railways, factories, power generation, as evidence of constructive economic policy, not destructive monetary manipulation. This narrative found receptive audiences among Western observers predisposed to view Japan as a modernizing influence in Asia and skeptical of Chinese government claims. The Yokohama Specie Bank's international reputation provided crucial cover. The bank maintained correspondent relationships with major financial institutions in New York, London, Paris, and other financial centers. These relationships required the bank to maintain professional standards and submit to periodic audits. No audit ever detected counterfeiting operations because the operation occurred entirely in occupied territories outside auditor's scope and used facilities not officially connected to the bank. The Mukden and Harbin printing facilities operated under Manchukuo government nominal control, not as Yokohama Specie Bank branches. Currency distribution through bank branches appeared as routine banking operations. The institutional separation between printing and distribution meant that even thorough auditing of the bank's operations in Japan or Western financial centers would reveal nothing suspicious. Chinese attempts to restrict counterfeit circulation through administrative measures proved ineffective without international cooperation. In 1938, the Chinese government issued regulations requiring banks in Chinese-controlled territories to reject notes with specified serial number ranges identified as counterfeits. This merely shifted counterfeit circulation to occupied zones where Chinese regulations didn't apply. Other attempted controls, requiring merchants to verify large transactions through approved banks, restricting interprovincial currency transfers, and implementing regional currency zones, created economic inefficiency without stopping counterfeit distribution. Some measures backfired, such as when Chinese authorities required large transactions to use newly issued currency with updated security features. This simply gave Japanese counterfeiters clear guidance on which new currency designs to prioritize for reproduction. American business interests in China complicated U.S. government response. American firms operating in China, oil companies, manufacturers, banks, held yuan-denominated assets and conducted business requiring currency stability. These firms recognized that inflation in occupied territories threatened their interests, but also feared that aggressive U.S. opposition to Japanese policies might provoke Japanese retaliation against American business operations. American chambers of commerce in Shanghai and other Chinese cities urged caution in U.S.-Japan relations, arguing that maintaining commercial access took priority over confronting Japanese economic policies. This business lobby influenced State Department calculations, adding to reasons for avoiding confrontation over currency issues. The international press largely missed the story. Western journalists in China focused on military developments, battles, territorial changes, political negotiations. Economic conditions received less coverage unless they created dramatic visual stories. Hyperinflation in occupied territories, while devastating to those experiencing it, didn't produce compelling photographic or written narratives for readers in New York, London, or Paris. The few journalists who reported on economic conditions in Manchuria generally attributed inflation to wartime disruption rather than systematic policy. Without understanding the counterfeit operation's role, their reporting described effects without explaining causes. By 1941, Chinese authorities had essentially abandoned attempts to address the counterfeiting through international channels. The limited international response to Japanese territorial aggression, military atrocities, and resource extraction made clear that exposing economic warfare would achieve nothing. Chinese focus shifted to survival, managing monetary policy in areas still under nationalist government control, maintaining whatever economic stability possible amid ongoing conflict, and preventing Japanese counterfeit operations from completely destroying Chinese currency credibility. The international community's failure to respond to Chinese evidence about systematic counterfeiting reflected broader patterns: Western powers unwilling to confront Japanese aggression effectively, weak international institutions lacking enforcement mechanisms, and global attention increasingly focused on European war that began in 1939. The counterfeit operation proceeded unopposed internationally through the entire period of Japanese occupation, No sanctions were imposed. No international investigations occurred. No diplomatic consequences followed from economic warfare that impoverished millions of Chinese civilians. The weapon remained largely invisible to international observers, allowing Japan to conduct the largest government-sponsored counterfeiting operation in history without meaningful international response. This silence enabled escalation. As Japanese forces occupied additional Chinese territory through 1941, counterfeit operations expanded proportionally, applying lessons learnt in Manchuria to new occupied regions. Japan's full-scale invasion of China, beginning in July 1937, created new territories for counterfeit currency operations. The pattern established in Manchuria, military conquest followed by systematic monetary manipulation, replicated across northern and central China. By late 1937, Japanese forces controlled Beijing, Tianjin, Shanghai, and dozens of smaller cities across Hebei, Shandong, and Jiangsu provinces. Each newly occupied area became a target for currency operations designed to facilitate resource extraction while impoverishing local populations. The scale of counterfeiting expanded accordingly. Production that had totaled approximately 5 billion yuan annually in 1936, mostly targeting Manchuria, reached an estimated 12 billion yuan annually by 1939, spread across occupied territories throughout eastern China. The Shanghai operation demonstrated the sophistication achieved by 1938. Shanghai, China's commercial and financial center, had operated on a complex monetary system involving multiple currencies before Japanese occupation. The Chinese yuan circulated alongside foreign currencies, particularly US dollars and British pounds. Major foreign banks, Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, Citibank, Chartered Bank, maintained branches and issued their own notes accepted in commerce. Japanese authorities couldn't simply flood Shanghai with counterfeit Chinese yuan without affecting this broader financial ecosystem. Instead, they implemented targeted operations against specific currency types based on strategic considerations. The Yokohama Specie Bank's Shanghai branch, operating since the 1890s, became the distribution hub. The branch occupied a prominent building in the international settlement, giving it legitimacy and access to commercial networks. After Japanese forces occupied Chinese-controlled portions of Shanghai in late 1937, the international settlement and French concession remained technically neutral territories. The bank's operations expanded. Counterfeit Chinese yuan entered circulation primarily in Japanese-controlled districts, affecting commerce while avoiding areas where foreign banks might detect and expose forgeries. Japanese authorities calculated that flooding the entire city with counterfeits risked international incident if foreign banks or foreign nationals experienced losses. Selective distribution in Chinese-populated areas under Japanese military control minimized this risk while achieving strategic objectives. Technical challenges increased with operations across diverse territories. Each Chinese region used different currency variants. Banks in different provinces issued notes with distinct designs. Warlord-controlled areas sometimes issued local currencies. Reproducing this variety required the Mukden and Harbin facilities to run multiple production lines simultaneously, each producing different note types. By 1938, Japanese printing operations were producing counterfeit versions of at least 15 different Chinese currency variants, plus counterfeits of notes issued by foreign banks operating in China. The logistics of managing this production, tracking which templates to use, maintaining quality control across multiple note types, and distributing appropriate counterfeits to relevant regions required sophisticated coordination. Japanese authorities established a third major printing facility in Beijing in 1938, specifically for producing counterfeits of currency types used in northern China provinces. This facility, operating under nominal control of the Provisional Government of the Republic of China, a puppet regime established in Beijing, employed over 400 workers and produced an estimated 200 million yuan monthly by 1939. The Beijing facility's output included not just counterfeits of existing Chinese currency, but also notes issued by the puppet government itself. Japanese planners had realized that controlling a puppet government's currency issuance provided perfect cover for massive counterfeiting. They simply printed far more of the puppet government's own currency than economic conditions warranted, creating inflation while maintaining complete deniability. If inflation occurred in areas governed by Chinese puppet regimes, outside observers would blame poor economic management by those regimes, not Japanese manipulation. The human cost of expanded operations mirrored Manchuria's experience. Cities across northern China experienced accelerating inflation, wage price spirals, unemployment, malnutrition, and social breakdown. In Beijing, rice prices increased 400% between 1937 and 1940. In Tianjin, unemployment among Chinese workers reached 40% by 1939. In occupied portions of Shanghai, homelessness increased dramatically as inflation destroyed working-class families' ability to afford housing. The pattern repeated everywhere: military occupation followed by economic collapse, engineered through monetary manipulation, destroying civilian economic life while facilitating Japanese resource extraction. Japanese forces applied counterfeiting operations beyond China as they expanded into Southeast Asia. When Japan occupied French Indochina in 1940, counterfeit operations targeting the Indo-Chinese piastre began within months. When Japanese forces swept through British Malaya, Dutch East Indies, and the Philippines in 1941, 1942, each conquest triggered counterfeit operations against local currencies. The Yokohama Specie Bank established branches throughout occupied Southeast Asia, each becoming a distribution point for counterfeit notes produced in expanded Japanese printing facilities. By 1942, Japanese counterfeit operations affected currencies across territories stretching from Manchuria to Burma, encompassing populations exceeding 400 million people. The Southeast Asian operations differed somewhat from Chinese operations due to different economic conditions and currencies involved. Southeast Asian economies relied heavily on commodity exports: rubber, tin, rice, controlled by European and American companies before Japanese occupation. Japanese authorities needed these industries operating to extract resources for Japan's war economy. Simply destroying local currencies through hyperinflation might collapse commodity production entirely. Instead, Japanese planners implemented more calibrated operations, injecting sufficient counterfeit currency to depress local purchasing power and facilitate below-market resource purchases, but not so much as to cause complete economic breakdown. This required careful monitoring and adjustment, with counterfeit production volumes varied based on local inflation rates and economic indicators. The technical challenges of counterfeiting Southeast Asian currencies differed from Chinese currency reproduction. British, French, and Dutch colonial currencies incorporated sophisticated anti-counterfeiting features and used paper stocks and inks not available in Japan. Japanese technicians obtained samples of these currencies and conducted analysis, but producing convincing counterfeits proved more difficult than with Chinese notes. Some Southeast Asian counterfeits achieved quality matching Chinese operations, while others were detectably inferior. Japanese authorities adapted by distributing lower quality counterfeits primarily in rural areas where recipients had limited ability to verify authenticity, while using higher quality counterfeits in cities where scrutiny was greater. The expansion of counterfeiting operations created coordination challenges. By 1942, Japanese printing facilities in Japan, Manchuria, China, and Southeast Asia produced counterfeits of dozens of different currencies, distributed through hundreds of Yokohama Specie Bank branches and cooperating institutions, affecting economies across territories controlled by different Japanese military commands. The Ministry of Finance in Tokyo maintained overall coordination, but regional military commanders sometimes pursued independent counterfeiting operations that conflicted with ministry policies. The Southern Army in Southeast Asia, for instance, printed excessive quantities of counterfeit local currencies in 1942-1943, causing inflation that disrupted resource extraction operations. Ministry of Finance officials attempted reining in these independent operations, but lacked direct authority over military commanders. The resource extraction facilitated by counterfeiting operations reached enormous scale by 1942-1943. Japanese industries received coal, iron ore, oil, rubber, tin, timber, rice, and other materials from occupied territories at prices held artificially low through monetary manipulation. Chinese coal that might have cost 20 yuan per ton at legitimate market prices sold for 810 yuan, to Japanese buyers who then paid in currency that inflation rapidly devalued. Southeast Asian rubber that would cost 40 piastres per kilogram at market rates sold for 1520 piastres under Japanese-controlled pricing, enforced through counterfeit-driven economic distortion. The total value extracted through these mechanisms exceeded tens of billions of dollars in contemporary terms, an enormous hidden subsidy for Japan's war economy. The counterfeit operation's strategic importance to Japan's war effort became clear in internal Japanese planning documents from 9041-1943. Ministry of Finance analyses calculated that monetary operations in occupied territories reduced resource acquisition costs by approximately 60% compared to purchasing those same resources at legitimate market prices. This cost reduction proved critical for sustaining Japan's war economy given the resource constraints Japan faced. Without systematic counterfeiting enabling below-market resource extraction, Japanese planners concluded that maintaining war operations at 1942-1943 levels would have been economically impossible. The counterfeit operation wasn't merely an adjunct to military conquest, it was integral to Japan's ability to sustain prolonged war.